How is it going, guys? It's Nutshell here, and today I want to talk about something that you can use in order to make a ton of money from the new players that are going to be joining into the game when the DLC for PVE is finally released. Before we get into this video, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has subscribed. I really do appreciate your time and the effort that you do put into some of the comments. I really do value it very, very much. So if you aren't already subscribed and you want to help me out, as well as, you know, be informed of when we upload and some of the kind of time gated content that you might want to take advantage of, then make sure to subscribe down below. But with that, let's jump into the video. Now, we have been about a week since the release of essentially all of the PVE changes, which include the local raids and that sort of thing, and BSG themselves have stated that we will be seeing the PVE mode be a DLC within 1 to 2 weeks of the release of update 0.195 or 19.5, so essentially one of the recent updates to the PVE mode, which means that within the next week or maybe even slightly less, the DLC will be purchasable for almost everyone that does indeed play the game. So with that in mind, and considering that you guys, if you're watching this video and you already have PVE and you're thinking, how can I profit off of this? Well, that is exactly what we're going to have a look at today, with two really good resources that you can use, and I highly recommend them as well. There's something that I've been using over the course of Tarkov, whether it was during the PVE mode or during PvP. They are two very, very good reward or systems to track what you're doing in the game. So, obviously, when all of the new players come into the game, they are going to be doing everything that we've already done in the game, which means they're going to require all of the hideout items, they're going to require all of the quest items, and they are going to require a ton of extra bits and bobs that are for the game. And so, in order to maximize what we can make off of the latest updates, we can essentially buy up some of those items and keep hold of them for when the new players do arrive and eventually need those items themselves. So with that in mind, let's jump over now to, of course, the actual item checklist of what you need for various different things. So with that in mind, there are two things. You've got the quest items and you've also got the hideout items. Now, from experience, the hideout items that are required are much more expensive because a lot of the quest items are required to be found in raid, as opposed to just having those items available for everyone. Now, we are looking at the Tarkov.help here. Now, there is a Tarkov tracker one that gives you the required items as well, which you can see right here, and this has essentially all of the items required for the hideout, and then it also has all of the kind of quest items that you aren't gonna need in the game. So with that in mind, you can see in this item, so tarkovtracker.io, you can see that there is Salewa, for example. There is your body armor, you've got your shotgun, all of these with the tick mark, that is the found in raid. Now, there are quite a few things that are not required for found in raid. Now, what we can do in order to make it a little bit more visually easy to see is we can go to this grid view, which is up in the top right hand side. You've got the settings. Now, you can use it for your own tasks and to basically essentially go through and tick off the ones and items that you require and have actually got for your tasks as well. So, you know, you could use it yourself, but primarily we're using it as a guide to figure out what we can buy and what other people are going to have to buy and essentially make money off of it, because of course supply is going to be somewhat similar. Maybe it will increase, obviously, because there's new players coming into the game. There's going to be more players playing the game. But of course, the demand is going to go through the roof. Right now, the level at which the supply versus the demand is significantly lower than when everybody from the new people who come in are going to require these items. And although the demand goes up, the supply might triple instead of, you know, double for the actual supply. So it's going to end up raising the prices of a lot of these items, which is what this video is about. So in terms of making it easy to see, obviously we go up into the settings icon and turn on the grid view. There is of course a detailed view as well, which you can see here. Whichever one that you prefer makes it quite easy to see, but this one for me makes it very, very simple to actually see and be able to pick the items that we need. So starting off, found in raid, obviously we do not need these. We are basically, they're not going to be useful for our money making method, so we are not going to kind of think about those those when we see them. But things like toolkits, for example, which are required for farming part 1 and farming part 2 are not required to, or farming part 1, so you need 2 of those, are not required to be found in raid, which means that toolkits or tool sets are a great way of making some extra money. So in terms of what we want to do is buy up a couple of tool sets. They're relatively cheap right now to a degree, and so if we were to go to search for them, they are about 70k, and if we go over to the actual game, you can see it's sitting around 70k. So if you are wanting to buy something, tool sets usually go up to about 150k, so they could double in price, and so the more of these that you do actually have, the better it's going to be. So how can you actually do this? Because obviously stash space does become a problem. Well, you're going to be wanting to buy a ton of junk boxes and clearing out the junk boxes that you currently have full of random stuff that you do not need. Like a lot of our junk boxes are just from what I've kind of gathered up over the last couple of weeks. And so we'll go through and sell everything in here that isn't then going to be needed by new players. So that's what I do for in terms of space and that sort of thing. And you can do the same. Obviously, thick items case is very expensive. So, you know, purchasing them just to make some money off of new players isn't going to be worth it financially. But if you want a thick items case, now might be the time to do it because, of course, supply and demand. And when the new players start to go through the game and end up buying up things that are required for the barter trades for thick items cases, it's only going to get more expensive. For example, this one with defibs and ledexes, I had to buy this recently, cost me about 25 million because the defibs went down to about 1,300,000, so 1.3 million. So we bought up about 15 of those, and then we bought up the ledexes, which were super cheap as well. And they are quite cheap anyway. So with that being said, let's jump back over to the website now. And if we go over to here, you can see that we've got the tool set, but there's also plenty more other things. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one of the items that you could buy, but things like gold neck chains for chumming. Ideally, you want to be looking at quests that are low tier quests, so quests that are going to be completed quite early on and required. So things like gunsmith tasks that require you to get specific items that are for the actual gunsmith task. So if we go down, hopefully we'll see some of the weapon components, although this one doesn't actually show it. I think that this one actually does. So if we go right to the bottom, you can see all of the requirements for the gunsmith tasks, and there's loads of them. And so often a lot of these items that are required for the gunsmith task do go up massively. They can, you know, scopes and stuff like that can go for anywhere from 40 to 50k all the way up to like a 200, just because it's required for a lot of the low tier gunsmith tasks. And usually per gunsmith task there is like one item that is crazy expensive. So especially in the beginning of a PvP wipe, you will see this very much so. And of course in the PvE wipe, these are never going to be as expensive as they first were when we started playing. If you've got the Unheard edition or if you've got EOD, probably not as expensive as then. But when they do come in, they will go up massively. So that's one thing that you can do. Obviously, a lot of these you can actually get from barter trades or crafting yourself. So when it does come out, you can actually use your crafts and stuff that you've unlocked or from completing quests and barter trades, that sort of thing, to actually sell off a lot of this stuff and make money that way too. So with that in mind, obviously that is all of the quest items, but if we go back to the Tarkov tracker, we can now look at the hideout items. And hideout items are where the big money is, because of course everyone usually does their hideout, and there is a ton of items that you do need in order to complete your hideout. So what can we do in terms of money wise for the hideout? Well, first things first is to look at the low tier hideouts, so level 1 hideouts, that sort of thing. So you can see here we have, for example, security, but it only requires 1 measuring tape. So investing into the measuring tape, not going to be worth it. However, lavatory, for example, 1 toothpaste. Now, toothpaste is a relatively rare item. Even though it's a common item, it's not often picked up and people disvalue how much it actually is worth. But if we then go over back to the game and search in for some toothpaste, which should be fairly easy to actually get, and we have a look at the price of the toothpaste, you can see sitting around 30k. But when this was actually first released into the game, you'll find that toothpaste is much more expensive. 150k I was buying toothpaste for, so much kind of expensive. And because the supply, although it is decent, it is quite limited at the same time. So I highly recommend purchasing up some toothpaste, maybe buy 10 of them, and maybe they'll go for 150 to 200k as people do require them. And it's often these like random items that people often just leave on the floor because they're worth nothing towards the end of the wipe and are only really used for these that are going to go crazy prices. So you can make the most per money invested off of these sorts of things. So I'm going to buy up quite a few of the toothpaste when I do jump in. And then we have things like nails, WD-40, screws. So these are required in big quantities and will go insanely expensive. So for example, nails, they are required in a pack of 5. So if you can purchase up nails, it's decent. And at the minute, if we were to have a look at nails, hopefully we can see them, they're sitting around 40k. Now these could go up to 60k, they could go up to 70k. And usually the best way of looking at it is to look at what is required in the next one. And if there are repeatable things that do require nails, then this is where you can make money. If there's not, or you pick a X item that is required for one thing, but it's also required for another thing, that is where it can be very good for you and make you a lot of money. Similarly, there's also items that are required for quests, such as being able to knock down like the wall within the hideout, which requires you to have the sledgehammer. These sorts of things are worth having. And so that's kind of what I will look at. And of course, when you look at level 2, you can see all sorts of extra bits and bobs. So if you have a look at the stash, you've got hand drills, this sort of thing. Most people do have the stash anyway, so it won't be a big thing and will certainly be less of a impact on the price. But things like air filters for the air filtering unit are very expensive, but also the military power filters are going to lock out a lot of people from buying it. Things like the gym toolkit, electric drills, screws, bolts, these are all very good items to purchase and invest in, same as the insulating tape. These are stuff that I will be purchasing and buying up to go in there. And then, of course, you've got Bitcoin farm. This sort of stuff is potentially useful, but a lot of the time this is something that people will do later on in the wipe. But if you buy it early enough, then people will require all of this stuff. So buying up power supply units is a good choice and that sort of thing. And just checking the prices of these over time, and you'll see if they're going up in price. It's kind of what I would recommend. Now, I'm not going to tell you exact items to go and buy because maybe they don't go up in price, maybe they do, but you can use your own kind of ideas and thoughts and this sort of websites to actually decide what you're going to buy yourself. But we've talked about quite a few, the bolts, the nuts, these sorts of things. They always go up in price when that comes to a new wipe, and essentially opening it up to a lot of new players is essentially like the masses wipe that is going to be coming into PvE and starting to play, and therefore I would predict that it's going to go up. So I wanted to make this video as kind of a good tool if you're trying to complete tasks and you're wanting to use it as like a useful tool for yourself, which I'd recommend. And of course you can log in and sign in or whatever, and then you can keep track of all of your progress. You've got the Tarkov trackers for the quests and the objectives. It's not sponsored, by the way. This is literally just a website that I've used all of the time. I just thought I'd put it in there. And so, yeah, it's very handy, and I would recommend it entirely for kind of tracking some of the stuff in the game, as well as, completing all of your hideouts and just making sure that you know what you need for the next bits and bobs that you've got in Tarkov. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like it, and of course subscribe down below for more if you aren't already, and I will see you in the next video coming soon. Goodbye.